critically important. How in the world can I take anyone to jail if atheism is true? Here's a guy who I watched for weeks. He was a drug addict, and he was a multi-generational burglar. His dad was a burglar and a drug addict. His brother was a burglar and a drug addict. This guy I watched for weeks. He would walk around, score dope, and finally he ran out of money and had to do a burglary. And he would walk down the street, knock on doors. When finally somebody would not answer the door, he'd go around the back door, and I watched him do this. And I got in the backyard behind him, and I peered over the fence, and I watched him walk up to the back door. He tried the door, it didn't work. He sat and he thought about it for a second. He didn't just kick the door, he waited. He smoked a cigarette, got the nerve up, and he kicked the door. Now let me ask you a question. This guy is actually a drug addict. So you could argue he's coming off of his heroin. There's a certain brain chemistry. Couldn't you argue he only did it because of his brain chemistry? Couldn't you argue that he's a multi-generation? Maybe he's genetically predisposed to be a burglar. Can I really blame him? Of course, when he got to court, that's exactly what he kind of argued. But should I be able to hold him responsible? Let me tell you what they did in front of a jury. The judge looked at all this, and they held him accountable for it. They sent him to jail. Why? Because the judge said it pretty plainly, you had a choice. But did he have a choice? If atheism is true, do we all have a choice at all? It turns out atheists like me love certain things. We cherish certain things. We have a high regard for love and charity and empathy, but is there really true love if you can't truly, freely choose it? If you can't freely choose to love, you can't call it love. You have to have freedom to choose love, to have real love. Not only that, you have to have the freedom to choose between competing ideas to call this reasonable. Or to be creative, you have to choose between choices. Heck, even if I'm gonna hold you accountable, it can only be if you have a choice. I can't hold you accountable for your eye color. You had no choice. How can I hold you accountable for your actions if atheism is true? Here's what I mean. This stuff requires true free agency. Choices you can make freely. But really, why should you think you can make free choices? If the universe is, as atheists say it is, it's only got space in it, it's got time in it, and it's got matter, which means that the entire universe is just a material entity, a material environment. And if that's true, we have to buy into something called materialism. If materialism is true, we have to buy into something called physicalism, which means all the universe is just about physical properties. And if physicalism is true, we have to buy into something called determinism. Because if physicalism is true, all you have are cause and effect relationships between material objects. And you thought you had choices to make in your brain? Really? No, those weren't your choices. Those were just prior neurons that fired physical events in your brain that caused another cause. Like dominoes falling in your brain. Dominoes don't choose. Dominoes simply fall because of a prior physical event. You thought you made free choices? No, you didn't. Those were just physical events that occurred you had no choice over. You're no more than a robot, but we think we are more than a robot, don't we? We think we're something better than that. But here's what the atheism will provide for you in terms of determinism, and it's said by this atheist philosopher. Everything that will happen next week is already determined, as is everything that will happen next month, next year, and so on. It's also crucial to point out that human beings and their actions would not be immune to the effects of determinism. If there are exceptionless laws of nature, it stands to reason that our bodies, including your brains, would have to obey them. If that's the case, we need to stop calling these guys corrections officers. I work with these guys all the time, right? They work in correctional facilities. These are the officers that work in correctional facilities. But think about it. If atheism is true, could I really ever make a correction? Could I ever choose to do something? I should stop doing this and choose to do that? Is correction even possible if everything is physically determined? I don't think it is. And that's the problem with atheism, is it really promotes this idea. So what they try to do is redefine what free will is. Maybe it's what they call first and second order desires. I'm not going to get into that with you, but it doesn't work. Or they'll simply say, well, hey, your consciousness and your free agency, they just emerge. Just pops out. Just, I can't explain how. It's all cause and effect by physical, but then all of a sudden you have abilities. Really? That's worse than magic. Because at least with magic, I have a magician. This is, I got just, I think it pops into existence, a hat and a rabbit, but no magician. Then you have this one. Maybe we can just attribute this to quantum level mechanics. Oh my gosh. The idea here is that the quantum level, very small, there is not necessarily a cause and effect relationship. So that means that maybe you don't have to have rigid cause and effect determinism. Really? So then your thoughts are indeterminate? That's not better than having determined robot thoughts. This means your thoughts are there. You don't even know why you thought that. They're indeterminate. You can't even trust that you followed a logical sequencing. There's no cause and effect in your thoughts. That's too much to bite off. The problem, of course, is you're trying to stay inside the room with all of these theories, none of which get the job done. On the other hand, if there is a mind that chooses freely, creates freely, and creates in its image, now you can get something that Sam Harris, the famous atheist, denies. Because Sam doesn't believe there's a mind like that. So he just says, you know what? I know that my worldview does not allow for free agency. So therefore, I think free will is an illusion. Our wills are simply not of our own making. Thoughts and intentions emerge from background causes of which they are unaware and over which we exert no conscious control. We do not have the freedom we think we have. That's what you have to say if you don't acknowledge there's something outside the room that could create in its image freely.